Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. I met Daniel when I was 24 years old, fresh out of college and trying to figure out who I was in the world. He worked at a local bookstore where I spent most of my Saturdays. I noticed him first because of his laugh. It wasn't loud, but it had this warmth that cut through the dusty silence of the aisles. He recommended me a book once, something obscure I'd never heard of, and we ended up talking about it for nearly an hour. That conversation turned into coffee, and coffee turned into dinners, and within a few months, we were inseparable. Daniel wasn't the most outgoing man. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of person who paid attention to small details. If I mentioned I was craving strawberries, he would come home the next day with a basket of them. If I had a long day, he'd run me a bath without me asking. I used to tell my friends, he's not flashy, but he makes me feel safe. We dated for 3 years before getting married. Our wedding was small, intimate, surrounded by family and a few close friends. I still remember standing in front of him, hands shaking, hearing him promise to love and protect me for the rest of our lives. I believed him with every fiber of my being. We built a life together in a modest house just outside the city. Sunday mornings meant pancakes in the kitchen, evenings meant curled up on the couch watching movies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and I was proud of it. Daniel's career started taking shape a few years into our marriage. He had always been ambitious, though in a quiet, diligent way. He believed in climbing the ladder step by step, earning every promotion. He joined a mid-sized marketing company, and that's when Andrew Collins entered our lives. Andrew was his boss, a man in his mid-40s with sharp suits, sharper words, and a charm that filled any room he walked into. Daniel admired him deeply. He came home talking about Andrew's vision, his leadership, how much he was learning from him. At first, I thought it was harmless. Everyone needs mentors, but slowly, Andrew became a permanent fixture in our lives, even when he wasn't physically there. Daniel would quote him at dinner, replaying conversations they had. He started comparing himself to Andrew, saying he wanted to reach that level one day. I used to tease him, "You talk more about your boss than about me," and he would laugh, brushing it off with, "You don't get it, he's brilliant." The first cracks in our marriage were small. Daniel started working late. At first, I thought nothing of it. Promotions don't come to people who leave at 5 o'clock. But soon weekends disappeared too. He was always at meetings, networking events, company retreats. I found myself eating dinner alone more often than not. When he was home, he seemed distracted, glued to his phone, texting late into the night. When I asked if everything was okay, he would smile tightly and say, "It's just work stress. Things will calm down soon." But things didn't calm down. They escalated. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a hotel receipt in the pocket of his jacket. It was from a luxury hotel downtown, one we'd never stayed in together. The date matched a night he claimed he had been stuck at the office. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe it was for a client event, maybe he stopped for a drink with colleagues. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I stared at that receipt for hours, torn between confronting him and pretending I hadn't seen it. I didn't confront him that night. I wanted more proof, something undeniable. A few weeks later, my opportunity came. Daniel was in the shower when his phone lit up on the nightstand. A message appeared from someone saved under the name Alex. It read, "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." My hands shook as I picked it up, scrolling quickly. There were other messages, hidden under that false name. Short, passionate exchanges that made my blood run cold. When he came out of the shower, I was waiting, phone in hand. "Who's Alex?" I asked, my voice already breaking. His face froze for a second before he forced a laugh. "It's just a joke," he said. "A prank from a coworker. You know how guys are." He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but he looked at me with such convincing eyes that I faltered. He swore it was nothing, and though my gut screamed otherwise, I let it go, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The lies had a smell now, clinging to everything. I noticed the way he guarded his phone, the way he kept it face down on the table. I noticed the way he flinched when I asked about work trips. He became a stranger in our own home. Finally, one night, I decided to follow him. I felt like a criminal, my heart racing as I trailed his car through the city. Instead of driving home from the office, he headed downtown. He parked near the same hotel from the receipt. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, watching him walk inside. An hour passed. My mind spun with scenarios. Maybe it was a work event. Maybe I was crazy. And then he appeared. Not alone, Andrew was with him. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. They walked side by side, laughing, shoulders brushing. I thought maybe it was just business, two men finishing a long day. But then, outside by the car, Daniel leaned back against the door, and Andrew stepped closer. Their hands brushed. Then Andrew cupped his face, and Daniel didn't resist. They kissed, not a quick kiss. Not a mistake. A kiss full of familiarity, intimacy, comfort. My world shattered in that instant. My husband, the man I built my life with, the man who had vowed to love me, was kissing his boss. I drove away before they could see me. I don't remember the drive home. My eyes blurred with tears, my chest felt hollow. I curled up on our bed and cried until there were no tears left, only a deep ache that wouldn't leave. The next morning, I confronted him. I couldn't hold it in. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I forced the words out. "I saw you. I followed you. I know." He didn't try to deny it. He sat at the edge of the bed, face buried in his hands, and whispered, "I'm sorry. Sorry." That was all he said at first. I demanded answers. How long had it been going on? Why Andrew? Why the lies? He admitted it had been almost a year. He said it started with late nights, long conversations, mentoring sessions that blurred into something else. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen, but he also hadn't stopped it. He told me he was confused, that he didn't know how to explain what he was feeling. I wanted to scream. Confused? What about me? What about the vows, the trust, the life we built? I asked if he loved Andrew. He didn't answer. That silence was worse than any confession. I remember the silence after his confession more vividly than his words. He sat there, shoulders slumped, and I stared at him like I didn't recognize the man in front of me. The person I thought I knew so well suddenly felt like a stranger. I wanted him to look me in the eyes, to give me some piece of the truth that could make sense of what I had just seen. But he wouldn't. He stared at the floor, at his own hands, anywhere but at me. Almost a year? I repeated, my voice breaking. You've been lying to me for almost a year? He nodded slowly, tears threatening in his eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. That line cut deeper than anything else. You didn't want to hurt me? Daniel, you've been destroying me every single day you walked into this house pretending everything was fine. My voice rose, and for the first time in years, I shouted. You let me believe I was crazy. You looked me in the eyes and lied. Do you understand what that does to someone? He said he was sorry again and again, but sorry doesn't mend betrayal. Sorry doesn't undo images burned into my mind of him kissing Andrew in the shadows of a hotel parking lot. Sorry doesn't erase the countless nights I ate dinner alone, waiting for a husband who was giving himself to someone else. That night, I couldn't stay in the same bed as him. I grabbed a blanket and slept on the couch, though sleep never really came. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, wondering how many other nights I had wasted waiting for him. The next morning, I left before he woke up. I went to my friend Laura's apartment, dragging my overnight bag behind me. The moment she opened the door, I broke down. I hadn't cried like that since my father's funeral years before, ugly, uncontrollable sobs that made my whole body shake. She held me until I could finally breathe, then made me tea and listened as I poured out everything. "You have to leave him," she said, gently but firmly. "This isn't something you can fix." I wanted to believe she was right, but part of me still clung to the life we had built. 7 years of marriage doesn't vanish overnight. Memories flooded me, our wedding vows, the house we bought together, the trips we took. I wondered if all of it had been a lie, or if the lies started later, like rot spreading quietly through wood. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried everything to pull me back. He sent long messages, paragraphs begging for forgiveness. He said it was a mistake, that he didn't know what came over him, that it had never been about love but about confusion. He wrote, "You are the person I want to spend my life with." I was stupid. Please give me another chance. But every time I tried to imagine forgiving him, my mind went back to that kiss. The tenderness in it. The way his shoulders relaxed when Andrew touched him. That wasn't confusion. That was intimacy. That was choice point. One evening, I agreed to meet him for dinner, hoping for clarity. We sat across from each other in a small Italian restaurant where we had celebrated our anniversary once. The candles flickered between us, but the warmth that used to fill those nights was gone. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I still love you," he whispered. "I want us to work through this." I pulled my hand back. "Do you love him?" He froze. The silence stretched until the waiter awkwardly set down our drinks. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The lack of denial was louder than any confession. I left the restaurant before the food arrived. That night, I realized the marriage was already over. The papers would only make it official, telling my family was its own heartbreak. My mother cried with me, furious on my behalf. My brother wanted to show up at Daniel's job and drag him out by the collar. My father said quietly, "Trust is a bridge. Once it burns, you can't walk across it again." Hearing those words broke something inside me, but they were true. The divorce process was long and draining. Every form I signed felt like another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. Splitting our things was unbearable. Packing boxes of clothes and dishes, dividing photographs like they were evidence of a crime. I remember holding our wedding album in my lap for hours, unable to decide whether to keep it or throw it away. In the end, I put it in a box at the back of my closet, too painful to look at, too sacred to destroy. Through it all, Daniel kept reaching out. Some days he begged me to come home. Other days he grew angry, accusing me of giving up too easily, of not fighting for us. The irony was bitter. He had fought for his career, for his secret relationship, but not for me. Not until it was too late. I moved into a small apartment, just one bedroom, barely enough space for my belongings. At night, the silence felt overwhelming. I'd curl up in bed and feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on me. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to reclaim myself. I decorated the walls with art I loved, not things we had agreed on together. I played music at night and danced barefoot in the living room, reminding myself that joy could still exist in small bursts. The hardest part wasn't losing Daniel, it was losing the version of myself who believed in him. The woman who trusted. Without hesitation, who laughed at his stories about Andrew, who believed late nights at the office were truly about work. That version of me was gone. In her place was someone scarred, but sharper, and yet, as much as it hurt, I realized there was power in that. Pain had forced me to see clearly. Betrayal had taught me the strength I didn't know I had. The court hearings were brutal in their simplicity. You stand in front of strangers and watch your marriage reduced to paperwork and signatures. There's no acknowledgement of the tears shed in the middle of the night, no mention of the way your heart splintered when you found out the truth. It's just names on documents, items divided like possessions at an auction. I sat there listening to lawyers discuss our finances as if they weren't slicing apart the life I once thought was unshakable. Daniel avoided my eyes most of the time. When he did look at me, it was with an expression I couldn't read: regret, guilt, maybe even love, but love warped into something unrecognizable. Sometimes I caught myself staring at him, searching for the man I married, the man who used to bring me strawberries just because I mentioned craving them. But that man was gone. Or maybe he never truly existed, and I had built him in my imagination. When the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse into the cold air and felt both heavy and light at once. Heavy with the finality of it all, light because at least the waiting was over. There was no more maybe. There was only an end, but endings don't clean themselves up neatly. They leave trails. I ran into Daniel twice in the months that followed. Once at the grocery store, where we both froze between the produce aisles. He gave me a small, tentative smile and whispered, "How are you?" I mumbled something polite before walking away, my chest tight, my hands trembling. Another time, I saw him outside a cafe, sitting with Andrew. They looked comfortable, like a couple. I couldn't breathe. I turned and left before they saw me, but the image lingered for days. People around me had their own reactions. Some friends told me to be angry forever, to never forgive. Others whispered that maybe he had been hiding who he really was, and in a way, it wasn't about me. But betrayal doesn't care about labels. It doesn't matter if the other person was a man or a woman, a boss, or a stranger. What matters is the lying, the stealing of trust, the rewriting of your life without your consent. For a long time, I struggled with questions that had no answers. Did he ever truly love me? Was I just a placeholder until he found Andrew? Or did he love us both in different ways? None of it made sense. Love isn't supposed to be divided like that. Love is supposed to be whole. There were nights when I found myself scrolling through old photos, torturing myself with memories. The two of us smiling on vacation, dancing at weddings, decorating our first Christmas tree. I'd stare at those images and think, was he already betraying me then? Or did the betrayal come later, creeping in like a shadow? It was like living in a haunted house, where every room contained ghosts of laughter that now felt poisoned. The hardest part was not hating myself. Betrayal makes you question your own worth. Was I not enough? Was I blind? How could I have missed the signs? I replayed conversations, dinners, moments of affection, searching for clues. I wondered if the other people in our lives had known before I did. Sometimes I caught coworkers looking at me with pity, and it made me furious. I should have been the first to know, not the last. Still, amid all the pain, I felt something shift. With each day, I became a little more certain that his choices were not a reflection of my value. They were a reflection of his weakness, his inability to be honest, his selfishness. That clarity became my anchor. Healing isn't a straight line. It's not like you sign the divorce papers and suddenly feel free. For me, it came in waves, some days calm, other days crashing over me so violently I thought I would drown. The first step was simply existing on my own. Coming home to silence was unbearable at first. I'd unlock the door to my small apartment and feel the emptiness press against me. I left the TV on constantly, not because I was watching, but because I couldn't stand the sound of nothing. I started talking out loud to myself, narrating what I was cooking, what I was cleaning, just so my voice could fill the space, but slowly, the silence became less terrifying. One night, I realized I was enjoying it. I could read in peace, stretch across the bed, eat dinner at whatever time I wanted. I didn't have to wonder if Daniel was really working late or if he was sneaking away to Andrew. There was no longer a secret living in my home. The absence of lies was its own strange kind of comfort I began to rebuild in small ways. I bought plants and lined them along the window, watching them grow as proof that I could nurture life again. I started running in the mornings, feeling the burn in my legs, the sweat on my skin, the reminder that my body was strong. I even picked up painting, something I hadn't done since high school. At first the canvases were just smears of color. Angry reds and dark blues. But over time, brighter shades crept in, yellows, greens, even pinks. My emotions spilled onto those canvases, and I hung them on the walls like battle scars turning into art. Friends rallied around me. Laura, especially, refused to let me isolate. She dragged me out to brunches, to concerts, to nights of laughter I didn't know I still had in me. At first, I went reluctantly, forcing smiles. But soon, the smiles became real. I started remembering who I was outside of being Daniel's wife. I remembered that I was funny, curious, ambitious. I remembered that I deserved joy. There were setbacks, of course. Once, I bumped into Daniel and Andrew at a cafe. They looked like a couple, comfortable, familiar. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I left before they saw me, but the image haunted me for days. Another time, I had a nightmare where Daniel came home, climbed into bed beside me, and whispered apologies I almost believed. I woke up sobbing, sheets tangled around me, heart aching like it had all just happened again, but each time I broke, I pieced myself back together a little stronger. Each time I stumbled, I found my footing more quickly. I started journaling, writing letters to myself the way I used to write letters to him. Except these letters weren't about love or betrayal, they were about survival. They were about reminding myself that I had walked through fire and was still standing. Months passed, then a year. The woman who stared back at me in the mirror was no longer the same. Her eyes carried shadows, yes, but also a steadiness that hadn't been there before. She had been broken and rebuilt, sharper at the edges but also more certain of her own worth. I began dating again, cautiously. The first few attempts were disasters. I sat across from men in coffee shops, nodding at their stories, but my mind would drift back to Daniel. I would compare every word, every gesture, and feel sick. But eventually, I met someone different, not perfect, but kind, attentive, patient with the pieces of me that were still healing. I don't know if it will last, and for the first time in my life, that's okay. Because my happiness isn't tied to whether someone stays or leaves. My happiness is mine. Looking back now, I don't see Daniel's betrayal as the end of my life. It was the end of a chapter, yes, a brutal, painful ending I never asked for. But it was also the beginning of a story I didn't know I was strong enough to write. He cheated on me with his boss, a humiliation I once thought would define me forever. Instead, it became the reason I found myself again. I tell this story not because I want pity, but because I know someone listening might be living in that same fog of doubt right now. Maybe you've seen the signs. Maybe your gut is whispering what your heart refuses to accept. Don't ignore it. Don't silence yourself. The truth always finds a way to break through. And when it does, yes, it will hurt. It will shatter you. But you will survive. You will rebuild, because betrayal doesn't get the final word. I do.